When I went to audio school way back, I learned that clipping was a bad thing. Clipping your tracks was bad. Clipping your mix was terrible. So I avoided clipping at all costs. I used limiting. I used compression. I did everything under the sun to avoid clipping for a long time until I learned something. Friend, clipping is not a bad thing. In fact, the top engineers in the world are clipping stuff within their mix all the time on purpose. Hey friend, Alex here from Audio Edges, and the words game changing have become thrown around way too much on the internet to the point where I try not to use them anymore. But if there actually was one thing I really wish I knew sooner, today's video could very well be it. So I encourage you to stick around because the truth is, I found out way too late in the game that clipping isn't bad when you use it the right way. In fact, it is magical and mind-blowing what it does to your tracks, and people actually pay money for clipping plugins that actually clip stuff. Myself, now one of those happy customers included. So what I'm about to show you about clipping has helped me get fuller, more dynamic, punchier, louder mixes. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how you can achieve this in your mixes too. And friend, I'm going to give you a bonus gift. So what is clipping? What is a clipper? What the heck are we even talking about? Well, let's start by talking about a limiter. You've probably seen a limiter before or even used a limiter. And what a limiter does is when a loud signal comes into it, and once it hits the threshold of the limiter holds back the loudest parts of the tracks. And it sets a maximum level that the sound can't go past. And then it tucks down and squishes the loudest sounds back in with the rest. Let me actually put this limiter on these drums that I have. I have some drums here as an example. And let's just see what the limiter does. Okay, so you see now how it is tucking down and squishing the loudest sounds back with the rest of the sounds and just tucking them in. That is giving us a louder track as a result, but here's the but with limiting. We've ultimately sacrificed dynamic range. What is dynamic range? What does that mean? Well, it means the difference of space between the loudest point and the quietest parts of the track. We've reduced that distance in that space. We've reduced the dynamic range because we've all kind of jammed it together with the limiter. And what this does is it ultimately can make your mix less punchy, and too much limiting will actually dull out the sound of the whole song. So I'm not saying limiting is bad, but I'm saying in some cases you might want to use an alternative which is going to keep that punchiness. It's going to retain the dynamic range. It's going to retain the punchiness, and it's going to give you back all of that headroom that you're looking for to get with a limiter so you can still get really loud tracks. In comes, enter the clipper. WWE entrance here, John Cena theme music. So let's look at a very basic and very popular clipper. It's called Standard Clip by Sir Audio Tools. And I bought this because it's hard to beat the low price for what it actually does. Now, what I'd like to show you is just me using the clipper so you can at least just see what's up. Then we'll talk about what it's doing and why it's so cool. Let's listen to the same drums again and watch me bring the clipper into action. Okay, so we got a few things going on. You might see some red peaks here, and you can also see the audio hitting the clip point when I bring the clip point down towards the audio. So check it out one more time. Okay, so clipping is happening on those loudest peaks, mostly our kicks and snares in these drums right now. So what is happening? Why is it so interesting? Well, with clipping, we are not tucking in the peaks. We are chopping them clean off. And we can chop them off a decent amount. We can chop off a whole good amount of it before you actually hear negative effects of clipping. In fact, it can actually sound quite pleasing to the ear, especially when we use soft clipping. There are two types of clipping that I'll get to in a moment. But what I'd like to show you is just the difference between having the clipper on and cutting off the tops and having the clipper off, just bypassed. Listen to the difference. It's not that much once we clip. Then I'm going to tell you what you're getting out of this afterwards, which is pretty sweet. So listen to the clipper on. And off. On. Okay, so you could hear there's a little bit of clipping happening on the top end, and that's something you can adjust between different settings and the amount of saturation you choose. But it's not really impacting the sound that much. It's not compressing it aggressively. It's just shaving that top off. And here's what you've gotten now since you've done that. You've gotten all that headroom back. So that same headroom that you need to make something loud, where you can now add gain back, right? You can drive this plugin with gain as well, similarly to a limiter, to hit the clip point. We're getting that back, but not reducing the dynamic range, the space between the loudest part of the signal and the lowest part of the signal. We're not reducing it. We're just chopping off where the top of the signal happens. Now, there are different ways you can chop it off. You can go with a hard clip setting, and this just chops it clean off instantaneously. No saturation curve. It would sound like this. Once I eased it off a bit, it actually doesn't sound too bad at all. You can actually barely hear the clipping that's happening. Now, this is why I say be careful. This is why I've said be careful, because as you can see, when I pulled the clipper down too much, you start to hear this ugly distortion that sounds nasty. That's too much clipping. That's the being careful I'm talking about. So you want to back it off to where it feels just about right. Hard clipping cuts it off instantaneously. You can get more artifacting, more of that distortion quickly and easily, and it can be harsh. So I typically tend to go with the soft clip setting. This particular plugin has different ways to do soft clipping. It has soft clip pro and soft clip classic. The difference is when you add saturation, it will the soft clip classic will saturate the entire amount of audio. Okay, it saturates the whole thing, but the soft clip pro setting only saturates anything that has passed the clip point. So we get a little bit of saturation just on the transients, okay, versus saturation on the whole sound. So those are different settings. I'll let you listen to them here. And at the end of the day, when you use clipping, make sure it sounds good. Pick settings that work for you, because there are a whole ton of different clipper plugins out there. This is just one of them. But between what we've learned about soft clipping, hard clipping, you can basically operate any other clipper with the knowledge you've gained in this video. So let's listen to some of the different sounds on these drums. It will add saturation, which will also add perceived volume. Way too much, obviously. And let me bypass that. Trying out the soft clip pro setting. So what we're getting out of this is better sounding drums, because this clipping actually sounds really pleasing to the ear when we use it subtly. And we're getting a ton of more headroom that we've allowed for, which we can now use to ultimately get a louder, punchier mix, because we haven't killed the dynamic range in the way that a limiter would. Last thing I'll say about a clipper is you're going to probably want to use the oversampling mode when possible because it will reduce the amount of aliasing that's happening, which is just an unwanted artifact from using a clipper with no oversampling. So this will help your computer do the job properly. It does use a little bit more brain power from your computer, so you can oversample as much as you can until you run into CPU problems. That, my friend, is the clipper, and there are all sorts of clippers, like I said, and there are even analog modeled clippers. And this is probably my favorite new find for this. It's called Gold Clip by Schwabe Digital, and this thing sounds phenomenal, adding an analog type of clipping character. Because believe it or not, especially in the mastering process, engineers love certain analog units because of the character they have when you push into them hard. And when you push into them hard, these units aren't necessarily acting like limiters at the top. They are just being overloaded naturally with signal, and it has to do something once it hits the clipping point of that unit. And so what it does is it'll clip it and add saturation of its own. But these plugins are just incredible what they do now. This is Gold Clip. I'm going to show it in an entirely separate video. Before then, my friend, I'd like to give you a gift for sticking around with me until the end of the video. It's called my home mixing cheat sheet. If you've been asking yourself, how do you even get those drums to sound great in the first place before we even get to the clipping part? This cheat sheet is going to show you all of my go-to EQ and compression settings for not just drums, but all sorts of instruments. So you can have a starting point for EQ, compression, and even some possible effects that you can add in. It's all there in this one-page chart that has everything from vocals to guitars to bass, drums, acoustic guitars, strings, you name it, it's on there. And if you just have this PDF next to you while you're working on a mix, you're going to be able to get results really quickly just by applying the most common settings out there. It is free. The link is in the description. If you enjoyed this video, it was so great to have you here. I hope to see you again, and I hope this isn't the last time. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.